You had mentioned earlier about as Armenians, it feels like we're always fighting and defending. I'm not going to fight for something I don't care about.
Mhm.
Karaki Nujde, one of our great generals, one of our great soldiers of the past century, and I may misquote it slightly, but says that, live for what is worth dying for and die and find something to die for that's worth living. If my homeland, if my faith, if my family is something that I would die for, then I'm going to live it. I'm going to live it now. And if it's worth living for, then I will give my
Mhm.
life defending it.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Beyond Borders Diaspora podcast. And I'm Seda Arzumanyan, your host. Our guest today has a journey that gives him a unique way of seeing the Armenian diaspora. He was born in Armenia, grew up in Canada, and now serves as a pastor at St. Gregory the Illuminator Armenian Church in Chicago. Because he has lived both the Armenian experience in Armenia and in the global diaspora, he brings a deep understanding of how faith, identity, and community come together. Through his work in the church, he connects and engages Armenians of Chicago and beyond in meaningful ways. I'm so happy to welcome Ter Andreas Garabedian today. Ter Andreas, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Seda. Thank you for having me, and I'm happy to be here.
Ter Andreas, how did you end up in Chicago? Can you share a bit about your journey from Armenia to Canada and then eventually to the United States?
Sure. So I won't take up too much time, as the journey of every one of us, no matter where we end up in life, often has its ups and downs. But on the surface level, so I was born in Armenia during the Soviet Union, during which time my father, who was a diasporan Armenian, which we'll talk about what that means a little more later on, was in Armenia studying in Holy Echmiadzin to become a priest. And so I am a priest, but I'm also the son of a priest. So for those who don't know, within the Armenian Orthodox Church, much like all the Orthodox churches, clergy are able to be married or not married, celibate. And so my father, being a married priest, was assigned to Canada by His Holiness the late Vasken Catholicos of blessed memory. And since then, I grew up in Canada from the age of 2.5, until the age of about 20. When I was in Canada, I had a very normal North American childhood. I got into a lot more trouble, perhaps, than maybe some other kids do, but uh,
What kind
both
of trouble?
there's a saying that pastors' kids are often the most troublesome because we know the rules and we know how to break them. And so, as a priest kid, I went to church, I grew up in the church, but I didn't develop my understanding of faith until much later on. And perhaps we'll talk about that. That's an entire separate thing. But much during my time in Canada, I went to college, I was studying philosophy, political science, planning on going to law school. And one day I walked out and I said, this isn't for me. I'm not enjoying it. And there was a time in my life, though I had swayed from the church, swayed from faith, and looked into other religions and such. I had come back to the Christian faith. I had come back to our Armenian Orthodox faith, and there was a time where I had contemplated perhaps priesthood is something that I should look into. And while my time in Canada was wonderful and blessed being with my family and parents, I had to venture off on my own through the blessing of my primate at the time, Bishop Pakrat Galistian, who had ordained me to the diaconate at the age of 17, 18. 2009, I received the right and permission to go study in seminary. And one of the reasons why Jerusalem is because, so the Armenian church has three major seminaries: Jerusalem, Holy Echmiadzin, and St. Narcissus in New York, the only North American seminary. There's also another seminary in Antilias in Lebanon, but these are the schools of theology for the Armenian church currently. Because I was born during the Soviet Union, I did not go to Armenia because those who've lived during the Soviet Union, those who are born in Armenia, just like many other Middle Eastern countries and other countries around the world, I had military duties. And so, because I was considered a draft dodger, and in order not to have any issues, I chose to go to Jerusalem. Additionally, Jerusalem is also a place of significance for Armenians, which I did not understand until much later. But one of the things that is significant is we defend our rights to be Christians, Armenian Christians in Jerusalem, with our sweat and blood. The brotherhood in Jerusalem is known as the military brotherhood, Zinvorial Miapanutun in Armenian. And I was a big guy. I mean, I'm relatively still big. I was a big guy. I was a football player and such. My bishop said, you should maybe think about Jerusalem because they need guys who can defend our rights. And so Jerusalem it was. So I went to Jerusalem. I studied there during my time there. I was blessed to work with pilgrims more and understand what it means to be a priest, understand what this calling truly is. During
Mhm.
that time, um, I met my future wife to be, and so as a seminarian, she was from Armenia. She had come as a pilgrim, and so I met my wife to be. Later on, as I graduated Saint James Armenian Seminary in Jerusalem, I had to make the decision whether to go back to Canada or continue my education. What should I do? And I decided to go to Armenia, get married, and continue my education at Saint Nerses, where I continued at St. Nerses and St. Vladimir's Orthodox seminaries, the Armenian and the Eastern Orthodox seminaries in New York. After which time, my bishop, His Eminence Bishop Hajag Barsamyan, who was in the Eastern Diocese, assigned me to Chicago. So, kind of tying back to my father's story, as priests, it's very much like military service. We don't choose where we go often. We are
Mhm.
called to serve. Priesthood is not a job, it's a service. And where Christ calls you to carry your cross through the bishop's guidance and blessing, you carry your cross. And so that's how I ended up here in Chicago.
Wow.
But
That's
it is
a
a story. It's a like I said, this is a short version of my story.
that's a great journey and story. So exciting. It's kind of interesting when you shared your story and you talked about Jerusalem and our role. It seems the Armenian identity, we always keep fighting for the Armenian identity and our existence, no matter what. It's in Jerusalem, fighting for our Christian faith, or just fighting to exist in Armenia, to keep our territory. It seems our identity is called to always fight. But what do you think? What are the most important things to keep our identity? And the language is one of those. And I would like that you speak about keeping the Armenian language as well, because you speak Armenian. You were very little, 3 years old, when you moved from Armenia to Canada, but you still keep the Armenian language and you speak fluently. How did you keep the language, and how did your parents ensure that you speak Armenian?
So you gave the answer right there. That's the key. My parents. As a priest, we want our churches to be filled with children or with our Sunday school our youth programs. We want these programs to succeed. But the reality is faith, culture, identity, discipline, education, everything starts from home, from mom and dad. The home is the first church. The home is the first school. Everything starts from mom and dad. For my parents, and so, you mentioned I speak Armenian fluently. So I speak both dialects, Eastern and Western. My father, who was from the diaspora, so he was born in Baghdad because his family had survived from the Armenian genocide. The first genocide of the 20th during the Ottoman Empire. And so he spoke Western Armenian. When he moved to Armenia, Russian Armenians, Armenian Armenians, they speak Eastern Armenian. And so I speak both dialects. And at home, we maintained Armenian. The truth is, if you speak either or, as long as you're speaking Armenian without Russian, Turkish, English, Arabic words, everyone will understand each other for the most part. There's some differences. But Armenian is Armenian, and we spoke Armenian at home. Faith was practiced at home. Our identity was formed at home. And absolutely, and you asked the question of how do we fight? How do we defend? First of all, we have to know what it is. If I don't care, I'm not going to defend it. I'm not going to learn it. I'm not going to grow. You know, I'm a football player. I'm a weightlifter. I love music. I love opera. Because I love these things, I'm going to learn. I'm going to spend time. I'm going to handle with care. I'm going to value it. I love my wife. I love my family. I love my kid, my parents. I'm going to spend time with them. I'm going to protect them. I'm going to know what's best for them. If I don't love what it means to be an Armenian, if I don't love myself, in other words,
Yeah.
if I don't love my identity, I don't care. I'll lose the language, I'll lose the cuisine, I'll lose the dance, I'll lose the faith, I'll lose all of it. Because there's, to be an Armenian, okay, well, to be an Armenian Christian, well, there's plenty of churches out there. There's plenty of languages out there. There's many restaurants, many types of cuisine. There's many types of dance. Why Armenian? Well, if I'm Armenian and I value that, then I'm going to spend the time and get to know it. And that ties into then I'm also going to go to church. I'm going to go to the concert. I'm going to go to school. Just like I'm going to spend hours in the cold watching, my favorite football team play, or watch, my favorite hockey team, or whatever it may be. I'm not going
Hmm.
to find excuses as why I can't get to my destination because I know it serves a higher purpose. Me
Hmm.
speaking Armenian, me praying in my language, me dancing, and I'm not a very good dancer, but me dancing in Armenian, eating Armenian food serves a higher purpose than just feeding my stomach or entertaining me. It feeds my soul. It forms who I am, and ultimately, I will hopefully pass that on to my children.
So it's beyond the language.
Absolutely.
Being Armenian and keeping our identity is beyond the Armenian language. We need to keep the culture, and it includes music, food, how we
Absolutely.
interact with each other, cultural norms. If you live in the US, you become Americans also, but you also keep your culture, language, and traditions to keep your identity overall.
Absolutely. And, it's as Armenians, I believe Vasken Catholicos, I mentioned him earlier, of blessed memory, used to tell his seminarian students, when you go out into the world, find the good and bring it back and make it into something Armenian. That doesn't mean go and copy paste, but
Hmm.
add flavor to it, do something with it, because just because we're Armenian doesn't mean everything is good, and that doesn't mean we like everything about what it means to be an Armenian today. We can't even identify there's Armenians that speak Armenian, there's Armenians that don't speak Armenian, there are non-Armenians, there's mixed marriages. God bless. No criticism to any of them. Know what yours is and then make it even better. Add to it, add flair to it, whatever, add spice to it, whatever that may be. And however that may be, God has made each one of us unique, whether it's our fingerprints, how we think, our identity, but we are serving a body. We are together as a community. There's something deeper. We're not self-serving and we are not self-efficient either. There's a higher purpose to who we are as Armenians, to who we are as Armenian Americans, Christian Armenian, whatever way you want to identify.
We don't always think about, okay, what are the things we can bring to the Armenian American community, but also what value we can bring to America where we live, or for the global world, what the Armenian community can bring to the world. And as you said, look at what we have, look at what the others have, and then create something that could be helpful or could create a value for the entire world. And I think as you are a pastor and your church is in America, is in Chicago, and you serve not only Armenians, but also other people, other nationalities. Tell me more about your congregation. Where are they coming and how you manage all these relationships with them?
So, first of all, I would be remiss to not say this year is our community's 100th anniversary. It's our centennial. And so, being a centennial, celebrating that legacy, that history, remembering the pillars and those who've created the foundation of who we are and who we can be today, we have contributed to more than just the Armenians in this area. We have contributed to the very fabric of what is Chicago, the Midwest Armenian community. And we are also a little bit more English speaking here at St. Gregory. But that doesn't mean that we are not we're not an Armenian church, and that doesn't mean we're only a church for Armenians. Everyone is welcome in the church. We are a church. Christ came for everyone. The Armenian church is the Armenian expression of faith. It's not only for Armenians. You mentioned Jerusalem. As Armenians, I don't know how many Armenians know that the first three queens of the Crusaders were ethnically Armenian. They can, I'm not going to go into the, Melisande and so forth. I'm not going to go into the history of it just for time's sake. Go research it. Ethnically, they were Armenian. And what they did, yes, Armenians benefited from. We have history there with the Armenian Patriarchate, but all Christians benefited. It's not just the Armenians. And so as the Armenian Orthodox Church, St. Gregory, the luminary Armenian church that's been in Chicago for 100 years, what we do, our mission is not just to serve the Armenians, however you want to define what an Armenian is. We are here to bring the word of God. Those who are Armenian, whether through mixed marriage, whether through, ABC, Armenian by choice, whatever it may be, they are experiencing the Armenian expression of faith. They're experiencing the Armenian culture. They're experiencing Armenian dance. And yes, my community is blessed to have half Armenians, mixed Armenians, 0% Armenians. Everyone is welcome because we are a church. John Chrysostom says the church is a hospital. Well, no hospital anywhere in the world says, what ethnicity are you as you walk in? No, this is a hospital. If you recognize you're sick, we are here to help heal. We're here to help teach. And so, Christ tells us to reach to all, to feed all, to clothe all. Yes, as Armenians, perhaps we put more emphasis on the Armenian families and communities, but just because of how we express our faith. the language, the food, the dance, etc. It's familiar, but that doesn't mean it's limited to them. And in my community, we have non-Armenians, we have 100% Armenians. Everyone is welcome. This community is a family. That when oftentimes we talk about a parish being a community, I always say we are a family. Doesn't matter, in family, you've got step families, you've got adopted families, there's many types of families.
Hmm.
We are Christ's family. He is the head of this family. And so everyone is welcome with.
I think it's worth to mention that Armenia was also the first country who accepted Christianity as a state religion. We had a really special
Absolutely.
mission in the world in terms of Christianity, and not that a lot of people know about this, but that's a reality, and that's the value also we bring into the religion as well.
Yes, absolutely. There are some people will say, well, Armenia, Christianity started in, the Judea, and with the Christ's death and resurrection in Jerusalem, and so it spread forth from there. Yes, of course, we're not saying it didn't, and there were Christians before there were before Armenians. Ethiopians, Assyrians, yeah, many Christian cultures. But what we are proud of is as a state religion. Armenia was the first one to adopt it as a state religion, where the king was not only baptized, but it became the religion of the state. And that, we're very proud of, over 1700 years, 301, and the persecution we've faced and continue to face, we have still remained resilient in Christ and in that faith. And that's absolutely part of our identity, which especially overseas in the Middle East in times of persecution has helped keep us strong, keep us united. Here within the United States, within North America, it's a little bit different, but that's a different
Yeah.
topic. But absolutely, we've contributed and continue to contribute to the world stage of what it means to be a Christian. But this is the thing. We always talk about other people not knowing. We as Armenians first have to know. If I don't care, nobody else is going to care.
Sure.
And so
Yeah.
if I care, I learn, I will teach others as well.
And also continue to keep the values, the behavior being Christian, the first
Absolutely.
Christian country, the first state Christian country. We need to continue to practice those behaviors, values as well. Yeah, let's go back to the Chicago community. And I think what has been really impressive for me living in the US for many years, when an Armenian comes to the American community, the first thing they do, they try to find the Armenian community. So they don't live isolated. They try to find the Armenian community. And usually it's through the church, especially in those cities like Chicago when we have the Armenian church. Tell us more about that experience. If somebody comes to Chicago, how they get connected to the Armenian community and church.
I can't tell you, Sedajan, how many times I meet Armenians in Chicago who tell me they've been here for years and had no idea there was an Armenian community. Your best friend is Google right now, or any search engine. If you care, you're going to find. And I say that both with some humor, but also in all seriousness. Post-Armenian genocide, as the diaspora continue to grow, the church has always been the first place, because the church in North America, in South America, in Europe, serves as a community center. Not everybody that comes to the Armenian church is the most, faithful person, the most religious person. There are plenty of people who don't believe in God that come to the Armenian church. Why? Because of the Armenian cultural aspect of it as well. Our prayer, of course, as a priest, is that eventually the faith will penetrate their heart and mind and they'll grow closer to God. But the Armenian church has been a place for all Armenians to always come and find community. Yes, as a church, of course, if you are blessed to have programs that can help with, housing, food, clothing, things like that, especially as you're new to this country, that's great. On the other side, if you're coming from California, from New York, or any other place, or you're going to these places, the church is a great place to network, to meet people. But ultimately, it's what you put in. If you come and you participate and you grow and you get to know people, you grow, you also understand yourself more. And so the church has always served that purpose as well. And so I said, and that's why, going back to what I said comedically, if you care, the moment you land in Chicago or, get to your hotel, Armenian Church Chicago, Armenian Community Chicago, 100% you're going to find us. You're going to find the other Armenian churches in the Chicagoland area. It's impossible not to find us.
And you actually did a really great job in terms of organizing different community events, like even Hash event, which is a typical Armenian meal. And you organized and invited people. And it's it's kind of fascinating to think about that the church is not the religious center, but also a community center. And you bring people through religious activities, but also community activities.
Well, as a priest, I'll speak as from the example of Christ. Christ came and taught. Christ came and taught us to repent, taught us to pray, taught us to fast, what it means to be a child of God. How did Christ do this? When Christ was born in a manger, when the angels came and told the shepherds, they didn't come with judgment, with condemnation. They came with the invitation to be part of a community. Christ came and ate with sinners. Christ walked with people who perhaps didn't believe, who were Pharisees, who he chastised and criticized. Meaning, yes, there are things that perhaps we as the church might not agree with. But again, the church is a hospital. It's there to help guide us. It's there to help protect us. It's there to teach us ultimately. And one of the best ways to teach, you gave the example of Hush, and you've been in the food industry yourself. You feed people. You give them food. Food is such a crucial part of who we are as Armenians and as Middle Easterns, as
Mhm.
people
Yeah.
from ancient people. The Armenian word for a friend, someone that you care for. What is it? For those who don't know, how do we say friend in Armenian?
Thank you.
Enker. What does the word enker mean? And with ger, the person you eat with. And so sometimes, as a priest, I might feel upset that my church is empty, but our festivals or our chash or whatever we do, the food events, the social events are more. There's more people there.
Mhm.
Yes, I might feel upset because I want people to come and I believe there's a truth in the church and I want people to be part of it, Armenian or not. But the social part, the feeding is also just as important. We eat with people, and perhaps that will create a catalyst, that will create an opportunity for a conversation. When I come over for home blessings or whenever I always say, I don't want dinner, I don't want food. I just want to have a conversation. But as Armenians, there's always food. It's impossible not to have food. Why? Because we talk, we share, we open up around a table, around a food. And so, that's the social part is just as important because it can lead towards building of faith.
Yeah, we can go different examples, like even the American churches I have seen thinking about different ways bringing people to the church. It's not only just service, but even organizing sports for the young people so they can talk about Jesus and just Christianity through sport activities or different ways. The same for Armenians. Food is a big thing,
Absolutely.
and we like to talk and get to know each other through food. Yeah, that's absolute. That's great. Let's go zoom out a bit and talk about Armenia itself and what responsibilities come with being part of the Armenian diaspora. I would like to start the conversation. How do you personally stay connected to Armenia even while living and serving abroad?
So, on a personal level, I stay connected to Armenia through family and friends. I was born there, my wife's family's from there, and so I have cousins, I have classmates, I have in laws, I have family there. It is impossible for me not to go to Armenia walking down the street and not to run into someone that knows me, even not as a priest, but also as a priest. On the professional level, or even as an Armenian, I stay connected in multiple ways. It's social media, the news outlets, there's many ways of staying connected. But again, going back to what I said originally, if I don't care, I'm not going to stay connected. Um, we have wonderful programs that exist right now, such as Birthright, ASP, which is through the Armenian Eastern Diocese Armenian Service Program. There's many programs that are out there for young Americans, North Americans, Armenian to go and experience what it is Armenia. And once you go and you connect there, you can't help but stay connected. And so how? That's how. What responsibility do we have? In order to know who we are, in order to know where we're going in life, we have to know where we came from. You can't, and I know it's a very generalized statement, but I think that's true about everyone and everywhere. If we look at the state of our country right now, we often look back at our past and we're saying, we talk about the negative things and how we want to kind of erase them. Every culture, every people, every history has negativity. Look back and learn from the negativity so you build on the positivity for the future. But then look back and learn the positive things as well. Look where we came from. Look at the language, the history, and learn, and continue to grow towards a positive. As Armenians in the diaspora, our responsibility is to learn, because by being strong here, our homeland, our roots are going to be strong there. If you think about a tree, or a plant, the roots need to be healthy, right? The roots underground need to be healthy. But as someone who works with plants, you trim the leaves on top. You don't go down and cut the roots out. You trim the leaves on top. You clean up around the brush around. You water from on top. And so both the diaspora and Armenia have to be strong in order for the roots and for the leaves to be strong. Both have to be strong. A strong Armenia is going to be a strong diaspora. A strong diaspora is going to be a strong Armenia. And I say that for all cultures, but as an Armenian, that's what I care about. And so in order for my roots to be healthy, I have to be healthy. And for me to be healthy, my roots have to. And so it's two hands serving the same body. And that's why I have that responsibility. Why? Because I care.
Yeah.
Whether that means to travel, that means to donate, whether that means to educate and to learn and to educate others, to teach my kids, etc. And so that's why I have that responsibility.
Yeah, that's true. You also talked about love to Armenia in our conversation earlier, and I really like the concept you brought, and I would like to actually bring that concept here as we talk. Sometimes we hear, oh, we love Armenia. But you suggested love is not enough. You can't just say love. You need to have a practical way to show love to Armenia. So can you speak up about that a little bit?
Absolutely. I mean, of course it is enough to have love, but love not as a feeling, love as a driving force. I can say I love my wife, but if I spend time only with my friends, with other women, golfing, weightlifting, going to clubs, doing everything, but not spending time with my wife, eventually that love is going to disappear. That love is not going to be expressed. That love is not going to grow. And eventually my wife is going to say, you don't love me. Oh, I do. How? If we love someone, if we love something, we are going to spend time with them, with it, learning about it, caring for it, tending to it. Why? Because the more time I spend with it, the more time I dedicate with whoever and whatever it may be that I say I love, or whoever that I say I love, the more that love is going to grow. It's going to serve a purpose. Love as a feeling will eventually disappear. And so love for Armenia means being with Armenia, going to Armenia, experiencing Armenia, and also then using that experience here. And then recognizing that when, you had mentioned earlier about fight, as Armenians, it feels like we're always fighting and defending. I'm not going to fight for something I don't care about. Kareki Nujde, one of our great generals, one of our great soldiers of the past century, and I may misquote it slightly, but says that, live for what is worth dying for, and die and find something to die for that's worth living. If my homeland, if my faith, if my family is something that I would die for, then I'm going to live it. I'm going to live it now. And if it's worth living for, then I will give my life defending it. I will protect it as much as I can. Whether that means as a husband, that means as a priest for my community, a father for my child, or as an Armenian for my homeland and for my history and for my roots. Our church fathers, Hovsepian, Karekin Catholicos, have said to be an Armenian, to be born Armenian is luck. To live as an Armenian is a boycott, is a fight. To die as Armenian is victory. I am fighting to be victorious. St. Paul says, I have fought the good fight. I've finished the race. Well, my race is being both Christian and Armenian. And I'm going to fight and I'm going to race. And I'm not a runner, but I'm going to race. Why? Because it's worth it. Because I love it. Because I love Armenia. I love my family. I love my church. And these things I'm going to fight for, live for, and die for.
So inspirational. Thanks, Andreas. I love that. And
Absolutely.
It's definitely lucky to be born Armenian. I love that.
And we have to be that. We have to go see it. If you're Armenian and you haven't been, even if you're not Armenian, I suggest you to go. But especially if you're Armenian, go see it. In French, there's a saying: "Far from your eyes, far from your heart." If we never see it, just like if we don't spend time with our loved ones, eventually they're going to be distant from our heart. If we don't see Armenia, it's going to be distant from our heart. Go see it.
What is your dream or favorite location to visit in Armenia?
Well, my favorite location is my grandparents' village from my mother's side of the family, which is in the northern border town in the Shamshandin region, Tovuz, Bert region, villages. Unfortunately, my grandparents are no longer alive, and so I don't have the opportunity to go see that area, but it's mountainous, it's beautiful. My favorite places to visit, of course, Holy Echmadzin, our, Zenantavayr Merhoku, as our poets say, the birthplace of the Armenian soul. I love going there. Gerard, the monasteries, there's so many places. But there is nowhere that I don't feel at home in Armenia. A few years ago, I had an opportunity to take a group of pilgrims from the Chicago community and from the United States to Armenia. And I landed a day early, and I stayed with my in-laws. And in the morning, I got up. I don't have jet lag, so it's not an issue. I get up in the morning and I leave. And my father-in-law is saying, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I've got things to do, and so I'm walking to the store that I had to visit." And he's like, "How do you know where to go?" I always feel at home in Armenia. I've lived in Canada. I grew up in Vancouver, British Columbia. When I go back and visit, I've been gone 20 years. Almost 20 years. I will be going back in a few weeks. It feels foreign to me. It's not the same Vancouver or, region that I grew up in. A lot of my friends moved away, they got married, their families, life goes on. I'm not upset about that, but it feels different. In Chicago, yeah, okay, this is home. My family's here, my community is here, but it's if I ended up in Miami and New York and California, I would live just the same way. But when I'm in Armenia, the moment I land, it's mine. No, no, I don't have an Armenian passport. Okay, I didn't serve in the military there. Okay, I left when I was 2, 3 years old with occasional visits every few years. But it's mine. That's mine. And so there isn't anywhere that I don't like going in Armenia. There isn't anything that I don't like seeing. I can vacation anywhere in the world if I really want to. Armenia is not a vacation. Armenia is going home.
Yeah, that's the way I feel when I'm in Armenia, and I pretend that I live in Armenia when I'm in Armenia. Like, I don't tell people that I came from the US. I just pretend that, yeah, I continue to live here.
When people ask me, where are you from? I say I'm from Armenia. I was born
Yeah.
there. I'm from Yerort Mas. I'm from
Uh-huh.
that's where I was born. And they're like, but your English is perfect. Well, yeah, I grew up from age of 2 outside. Oh, well, then you're not. No, I'm from Armenia. That's where my roots are.
Yeah. Thanks, dear Andreas. I appreciate the inspiring and deep conversation today. And we need to keep to be Victorians and share our great hospitality and culture with others as well. And if you haven't been in Armenia, even if you are non-Armenian, you should go to Armenia. It's a
Absolutely.
wonderful place. There's a great culture. People like to see other people, to visit Armenia. Go to Armenia. That will be our summary today. You have been listening to Beyond Borders Diaspora, where we unpacked one Armenian story at a time, and there are many more to come. Subscribe to our email list at beyondbordersdiaspora.com to be the first to know when new episodes drop. Find us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.